Hello. In this lesson, we will talk about conditionals in Java. Conditional constructs allow you to specify conditional execution of statements. So it allows you to skip certain parts of the code or choose other parts of the code based on a Boolean condition, right? There are a couple of different kind of conditional constructs that we will cover. The first one is a simple if statement. So if statement is of the following form. Right? So it starts with a new keyword called if. So keywords or reserved words have special meanings and can't be used in other places in the code, such as used as variable names. If is followed by a Boolean expression. If this Boolean expression evaluates to be true, the statements in the following block are executed. If it evaluates to be false, the block is skipped. Right. So let's take an example. So in this example, there are two variables. There's an integer named num and a Boolean called is positive. And if num is greater than 0, if the value is to be true, then is positive is set to true. If num is less than or equal to 0, then the statement is skipped. Right? That's how an if statement works. Let's talk about a few technicalities. The Boolean expression that you have must be surrounded by parentheses. That's required. Right? And obviously the block will be within curly braces. Now, if the block only contains a single statement, the curly braces can be skipped. So this section of the code can be rewritten simply without the curly braces like this. Now, another version or more extensive version of the if statement is an if-else statement. So this allows you to specify code that would be executed if the Boolean expression is true as well as if it's false. So in this case, first the Boolean expression is evaluated, and if it's true, the next block is executed. If it evaluates to false, then the else block is evaluated. Do note, now we're introducing another reserve or a keyword, which is else. So if and else are two new keywords or reserve words that we have introduced. So taking a solid example, you can check if num is greater than 0 and then print out that num is positive. Else you can print that num is not positive. So let's take that in our code and let's actually try it out. So I'll kick off IntelliJ. Now let me make this smaller. I have pre-populated some code to read an integer using a scanner class, right? So now if I plop this right after this, first we'll enter a number, and if the number is positive, it's going to print number is positive. Otherwise, it'll execute the else portion of the code. So let's just run this. Here we enter a number, and if the number is 5, it's going to say it's positive. Let's run it again. And if the number is negative, it's going to say the number is not positive. All right. Returning to the code, we can also have if statements nested within each other. So let's take an example. So let's look at this example right here. Now you have an if-else statement at the top level, and the if block contains another embedded if-else statement. So in this case, if num is greater than 0, if that's the case, then it further evaluates another embedded if-else statement. So in this case, it checks whether it is, using the modulo operator, whether it is even or odd, and prints that. If it is not greater than 0, then it prints, is a negative number. right? So that's an embedded statement. So let's try, let's replace our statement earlier, and let's try that out just for fun. Here we have gone ahead and replaced it, and then we go ahead and let's just say 5. So it's a number, it is 5, it says odd. And similarly, let's say if we had 8, it would say it's even. And if we use negative 99, it'll say it's a negative number. All right. Okay, returning to the lesson. Now we'll introduce another set of operators. So far we know about arithmetic operators, we know about relational operators. Now we're going to introduce logical operators that work on Boolean expressions. So these operators are not, and, or exclusive or, right? Let's just focus on the first 3. Not basically takes a Boolean expression and gives it the opposite value. So in this case, if there's a variable age, if age is greater, if your age is greater than 18, and if you not it becomes the opposite of that, right? So it becomes you're less than or equal to 18, right? And combines 2 Boolean expressions and is true only if both expressions are true. Otherwise, it is the compound expression is false, or is true if either or both are true, right? So these are the three. And exclusive or operates in kind of interesting manner, which is exclusive or is true if either expression is true, but not both are true and not both are false, right? And has some very interesting uses. So logical operators added to arithmetic and relational operators that you can also now use. Okay, with that, let's get to the next conditional construct, which are switch statements. And these are very interesting way of working. So again, there is a new keyword or a couple of keywords introduced. So let's first assume there is an integer variable called income tier that is set separately, and there's a double here called tax rate. And we are introducing a couple of keywords or reserved words, which is switch, case, and default, right? So please add that to the set of reserved words that you know about, right? So the switch statement has an expression, right, that evaluates 2 values, right? And so the first thing that'll happen is this expression will be evaluated, right? And based on the value, it's going to jump to one of the cases that has the value. So if income tier is 1, it immediately jumps over here and starts executing statements at this point. If it's 2, it'll jump right here, right? Whenever it encounters a break, it'll jump out of the switch statements, right? So if, for example, income tier is 1, it comes over here, executes this particular statement, and then it goes on to the next statement, and there's a break, so it jumps out of that statement, right? That's how it works. If there is no break, it'll just continue to the end until it encounters the next break statement, right? Now, this expression must evaluate to the same type of values that are listed here, right? So if this is a double, this needs to be double. If it's an integer, all of these values need to be integers. If it's Boolean, they will need to be Boolean, right? So then if suppose this evaluates to something that is not listed as in any of the cases, then it'll jump to the default clause. So default is optional, but is a catch-all if nothing else is matched, right? So let's actually try this out. We will copy this code and jump to IntelliJ. And what we will do is we will go ahead and replace our if statements with that. And instead of income tier, we'll get rid of it because we're already reading something called num. We will use num here, right? So we enter a number and then it will print the income tier. So the other thing we'll do is we will print our tax rate. And we will, okay, so let's try this out. Here, let's enter 2 and should print our tax rate is 2. Similarly, like if we we enter 8, which is not one of the values, so it should default to 3 to the point 3 because that is in the default. Now, interestingly enough, if suppose we get rid of or comment out this break. So it said, you know, if I enter 1, it'll come up here and evaluate the statement, and then go to the next one, evaluate that statement, and only jump out when there is actual break, right? So let's see what happens then. So we will enter 1. We enter 1. Interestingly enough, it doesn't, the tax rate isn't 0.1, it is 0.2, because what has happened, it got here, evaluated to 1, jumped to this case, did actually set it to 0.1, then it just moved on to the next, and it said to 0.2, and then it got a break, and then it's jumped out, and that's when it printed. So that's how switch statement works. And this kind of flow is useful in certain situations. So obviously, you can see this is a little bit more complicated than an if. But switch statements are very useful for doing menu type operations. If you're presenting a menu to the user and they're choosing some value and you want to execute some code based on that value, the menu item they've chosen, this is a very, very good construct. Okay, let's return to the lesson. Okay, so now we know that there are arithmetic operators, there are logical operators, and they're relational operators. And just like in math, these operators have a precedence. So if you're using this in a long expression without any parentheses, they will be applied based on their precedence. Just like in math, multiplication is applied before addition is. It is the same here with all these operators. So I provided highest to lowest precedence here, and of course the best usage is still to use parentheses to explicitly specify which parts of a big expression need to be done first, instead of just leaving a big complex expression in the code. Okay. I'd also like to introduce another statement or method, which is system.exit, which can be used to terminate the program. So now that you have conditionals in your toolbox, you can detect certain situations where you want to end your program, or if there's an error condition, you might want to end your program. And you basically call system.exit with a numerical value. This numerical value is actually sent back to the another application that might be calling this program to detect, to use. Traditionally, we use negative values to show that the program terminated with an error, and 0 to show that the program, or a positive value to show that the program terminated normally. Okay. The next thing we would want to cover is some trickiness around initializing of variables with conditionals. So let's take a look at this example. So here, this example, we have two integer variables, myvar and a num entry. Myvar is not initialized, num entry is initialized to something that is read from the keyboard, right? And the value that's read from the keyboard is then checked for being less than 0. If it's less than 0, then you initialize myvar, and then you print myvar. Now, if you put this in your program, you will get a compiling error, and the reason is the compiler cannot tell whether what the value, whether myvar has ever been initialized, because this particular statement is in a conditional situation, so it may or may not actually be executed, right? So sometimes you see that error. So let's just put this in our program just to see what shows up. So I'll go ahead and put it right after our switch statement. I'll put it right here. Now you'll see an error here. That's initialized variable. Even though you think, hey, I am initializing it, but it's still seeing that. Let's actually try to compile it, and you'll get this error that myvar might not have been initialized. Okay, just to be aware of that situation. Okay, now as with things that are more complex, and conditionals are complex, there are certain pitfalls to using them, right? And so let's go through them. The first one is a simple one, equal to, which is a relational operator, looks very much like an equal to, which is used for assignments. So something like this is perfectly valid. Here you're assigning a value, and this expression is actually going to return 0. That's how assignments work. So this is perfectly a valid thing, and it is not really comparing. So this is always going to return 0. So skipping an equal to might give your program will might behave very differently, but just looking at it visually, you may not really be able to see what is wrong and why your program is not running properly, right? The other one is forgetting braces. So in this example, I have an if followed by a Boolean expression and two statements after it. Just because the indentation makes it seem like both of the print statements are in the if clause or in the if block, but in reality only the first one is, and the second one is just comes after the if statement, right? So don't let that confuse you. Another mistake that happens very often is putting a semicolon at the end, right in this location. In this case, this is also a valid statement, and it's saying if I is equal to 0, don't do anything, right? This is an empty statement, and then this is just the next statement after that. So it may visually look like you have created a valid if statement, but you haven't, right? Other things to avoid is, code like this. If my bool is a Boolean variable, checking for it's true. This is extraneous because you could simply be doing this. My bool is inherently a Boolean value. So why would you want to check if it's true or false, right? You could just use it, my bool or not my bool, right? Dangling else is another interesting one. So let me take an example from above, and let's take this example, and I'll type it in the code, and I'll talk to you about why this is a problem, right? So let's we're not actually going to run it. We just want to show it to you, right? Okay, so let's write it like this, right? So if you have an if statement like this, right, the question is this else statement. So there's a if and there's a nested if inside it, and then followed by an else. And the question is, this else, which if does it belong to? Does it belong to this if, or does it belong to the one above it, right? And the indentation makes it seem like it belongs to the one above it. This is not the case. And else always belongs to the closest if, right? So this is the valid this is the valid indentation for it, right? So that's called a dangling else. Sometimes you might indent, it seems like behavior is one way, but the behavior is really another way. Okay, let's go back. I will leave this one be. There is a problem with floating point numbers are inherently have limited precision in any programming language. It's covered in a quiz, but there are also examples on the web where you could try this out. Duplicate code in if else. So if you have an if and else, and there's a print statement at the end of your if clause, and the same print statement at the end of your else clause, that print statement could really be taken out for both clauses and put after the if else. So try not to repeat code that looks identical in both if and else. You could really take it out of the if else and just have it once. Okay, that is the end of the lessons. Thank you.